Hello and welcome back to another session on the Tribal Impact LinkedIn Live, which is also recorded as a podcast. So for those of you that are listening online after the event, you can also watch the live recording back on LinkedIn. But today I am so thrilled to be chatting to Jessica Tompkinson, who's the head of global comms and corporate affairs for Unilever. And we're talking all about employee comms, employer branding, how that connects to employee advocacy, employee storytelling. Unilever is one of the best in class in terms of elevating employee voices on social media. And I really want to get under the skin and learn along with you guys that are listening and watching as to how they do that. And as always, before Jessica introduces herself, we've got the comments. So feel free to pop in some questions. If we can get around to them, I'll put them to Jessica. But first, welcome, Jessica. Welcome to the session.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. Do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction as to, your role, what you do, how long you've been at Unilever and where you're based?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So lovely to be here. I'm Jessica. So I'm the Global Head of Comms and Corporate Affairs for the operations side of the business at Unilever. So the operations side is the technology, capabilities and experiences part of Unilever. Now, hopefully, people watching do know who Unilever is. We're sort of one of the world's largest FMCGs. We operate in 190 markets. We've got 127,000 employees across the globe. And I have the privilege of working alongside the brilliant sort of technologists, experiences and capabilities function that make everything run beautifully at Unilever. So that's us in a nutshell. Some of the brands you might have heard of before: Dove, Hellmann's, Ben & Jerry's, Magnum, through to sort of Persil if you're in the UK, Domestos. So we've got some big brands probably sitting in your home. And it's a wonderful company. I've been here now for 3 years. I've had 2 different jobs in this time. And I've been in my current role now for 2 years. And I'm really, really lucky that I have the most wonderful team who work alongside me. And I'm part of the wider global communications function. So it's not just me and my team. There is a fabulous communications team here at Unilever who I have the privilege of working alongside and learning from every single day.
Fab, thank you. Yeah, and I do have most of those products in my house, I have to say. They're in the fridge, in the cupboard, So brilliant. Thank you for listing those out. Right, we're going to dive straight into the topic. And the topic of your role in communications and how that relates to, I've got so many things to ask you, Jessica, about all of this. But how does it relate to HR and employee or employer branding? Where do you sit in that mix?
Yeah, so the way that we're sort of structured at Unilever is we've got a global HR function. And we've got in the function that I work, the operations function, we've got what we call our people experience team. And our people experience team are the wonderful ladies and gentlemen who across the world help bring talent into the business, but also look after the day-to-day experiences that we have. So making sure we get paid, working alongside us from a sort of experience point of view. So they are the operational team who help bring in and retain the fabulous people that we work with every single day. To give you a sort of little bit of an insight into what that looks like is we hire about 17,000 people a year. So, your jaw drops. Mine jaw drops.
That's a lot of people.
So it's like big numbers here, right? But again, remember, we're a big global company. And you can imagine how many applications we get every year as well. So this incredible team work tirelessly to help find and attract the right talent. So that's the sort of people experience team. And then alongside that, we have our sort of global HR function, which is where our employer brand team sits, alongside sort of some of the more sort of like reward and capabilities, learning and development. But we work really, really closely together. So it's a really, really nice synergy. And that team are wonderful. They do so much work looking at how we attract the talent through LinkedIn, for example, finding people for jobs that, whether that's going into sort of digital, so the area that I'm in, into supply chain, marketing. I sort of say to people, Unilever has a job for everybody. Whether you're an accountant through to a technologist, through to a scientist, there's a role here. So our wonderful employer brand team do so much work to sort of really look at how to attract the talent in the places where, we might have gaps, but also where we're sort of trying to pick people up. So we work really, really cohesively together. And I'm really lucky that I do get to spend quite a bit of time talking to the employer brand team, in particular for the function I work with, about like how we're going to attract talent into our technology and capabilities roles.
So just as you were explaining that, I mean, it feels like I could see you such a wonderful ambassador for the brand, actually, as an employee advocate in its, the lovely people, great talent, great, so there's a real connection with that employer branding piece and the employees as part of that. Engaged employees, I think, show the culture of the organization through their activity on social and things like that. So how do you support your employees to maybe tell their stories, both not just internally, but also externally, and be part of that bigger employer branding approach?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because so another team that I work with is our fabulous content team as part of the global comms team. So we sound like we've got lots of teams. We're actually quite a small global comms team in the grand scheme of things, but we do have, just given the nature and the size, we do have different teams. So our fabulous content team, work really closely with our employer brand team as well. And, we do have incredible people every single day doing incredible things at Unilever. Like every company or any person who's watching this, I'm sure would say the same about their organisation or their business. But we can't talk about everything. It's impossible. So it comes back to, I guess, sort of some of the sort of principles and some of the sort of areas that we're sort of really looking to sort of amplify. So, we have a very, very sort of big commitment towards sustainability. So some of our content is focused on the people who work in our sustainability space, making, whether that's to do with like the living wage or working on sort of finding new ingredients. I saw a post up the other day of a lady who has been helping look at different sources of cocoa, for example. Bringing those stories to life from the people who work with us is always, I think, incredibly powerful. Sort of telling people about the jobs that they do is fantastic, right? And I don't think you can get a better advocate than somebody who is in the role, fulfilling their purpose, so what they really, really believe in and want to do, and are being successful and supported in the business, and being able to tell that on Instagram, LinkedIn, or even, our websites. I don't know a better way than to sort of really show what an organization is like. And we're such a diverse group of people as well. 127,000 employees. We are as diverse and rich as we are, anything that I've known. So there is always somebody who has a story about what they're working on that we can bring to life. But it's almost like we have so many stories. We have to sort of be quite targeted, looking at sort of what's topical, what's timely, and how we share those stories with the world. And geographically it varies as well. So our sort of team, our content team, whether that's the team that look after LinkedIn or Instagram, we also look at sort of what is happening, I guess, in the geographies that we operate in too.
So that's so hi Dave. Hi Dave Perry's here as well. Thanks for dropping a message, and a reminder to anyone who's watching this live, not listening to the recording or watching the recording, you can pop your comments in. I've got loads of questions for Jessica, but if you want to ask one, pop it in there. I've got a couple of things. It doesn't come more authentic, does it, than your employees saying the story. One thing that popped into my mind was, do you find those stories, or do they elevate them up internally, and you think, do you know what, that's worth bringing the Unilever brand behind that story and giving it a bit more focus? Or do people just volunteer them? How does it work?
No, a bit of both. So yesterday, I'm losing my days here. Was it yesterday? Tuesday. I'm a day ahead of myself already. We had this week our annual employee online conference that we have, something called Unilever Live. So we had an update from our new CEO, Hein, which was fabulous to sort of see him a few months into the role. But also as part of this sort of campaign, or sorry, part of the broadcast this year was what we call our All Stars. So I can take no credit for this campaign at all. It is led by our employee comms team, who, again, I'm very lucky that I work super closely with. And our employee comms team work to, I would say, sort of uncover the all stars of Unilever. So I was sat there watching the broadcast, and from this broadcast was the stories of, don't get me wrong, I'm going to say 12 different colleagues who have done the most incredible work to either transform the way Unilever operate or transform the communities that they live in, supported by Unilever. And I was watching this, and I can see Katia, who's in my team's just message. Oh. You know, I was welling up watching this because I was like, the passion that our colleagues have to improve people's lives is infectious and wonderful. And I'm so proud that somebody who is actually in our team was recognised for some work he's done to improve the accessibility of our office, our head office in Turkey. And he he's basically sort of created this app. So for somebody who's maybe got a visual impairment or a physical impairment, they can navigate around the office. And he's done this completely on his own. Wow. But with support from his line managers and the people around him, but he's created this sort of, technology that enables people to navigate around the office. And I was watching that going, my goodness, like how incredible are these stories that we have of people who, off their own gumption and their own drive, have gone and done something like that. There was also another lady whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm very, very sorry. Who has supported Black women with neonatal support, for example, completely off the back of like her own experience and supported by Unilever. And I was like, these stories are incredible, right? And I feel so incredibly humble and proud to be part of a community that have these people who, I guess, galvanize the power of us as Unilever employees to make a change without any sort of prompt from anybody around them to go and do it. And for me, it's those stories that just make Unilever who we are. And that's scratching the surface. And I would do no justice to the 100,000 plus colleagues around the world who do incredible things day in, day out. I just guess we're really lucky that we have channels and ways to be able to tell these stories internally and externally, to really sort of show the type of business and culture that we have at Unilever, which is, it's a big, tough commercial environment, but filled with these people who go above and beyond every single day to make, the communities and the places that we work in that much better. So, like, how brilliant is that?
That is quite incredible, because what's happening there is employees are doing these things centered on the cultural values of the business and with the support of the business, but they're going above and beyond their day-to-day job to do something that supports the ethos and what the brand represents, but also what their communities need. And that's really good. And the reason I'm picking on that is because sometimes when it comes to like the phrase employee advocacy, a lot of organizations will think, okay, that's all about getting brand content out there. But actually, it's way, way deeper than that. This is about elevating those stories that represent the brand and the values and what it supports over and above just getting brand content out there. That's and what you've just described there is just a great example of that, I think. So
yeah, it's interesting because when I joined Unilever, I didn't really know who. I'll be really honest. And folks internally, I didn't really know who Unilever was. And by that as a company is we have tremendous brand recognition. We've got 400 big brands out there. So I knew who Dove was. I knew who Persil was. I knew who Magnums and, Tresemme. Like I knew who all these brands were, but I could not have articulated really to you who Unilever was. And I think that is that is possibly one of the challenges that we do face as an employer, because, you know, as the comms lead for the technology function, I sit there day in, day out going, you can have any job here at Unilever that you can at some of the big tech companies, you know, whether that's sort of, you know, the work we're doing around AI and machine learning at the moment, through to some of the DevOps stuff, through to, it all exists there. But I think it's really interesting for me, still as somebody very new to Unilever, is I didn't know Unilever like I know Unilever now. And I knew the brands, but I didn't know the business. And I think now I'm in it and I know the business, and I sort of see how we're trying to tell the story of the business too, on top of the brand. And, you know, the brands are what keep us running. You know, we need the brands to be growing and profitable and making money. Like, you know, that's who we are. But it's the people behind the scenes in the business that I didn't really know until I got here. And I think we are doing a great job. There is always more to do in getting Unilever known, and who, you know, the jobs and the opportunities that are in a business that can give you endless career opportunities. So I think we're still on a bit of a journey. You know, but having said that, we you know, have so many millions of people apply for this every year. But I do think there are still certain jobs perhaps that we need to be doing more in to attract, compared to maybe, say, the marketers of the world who go, yeah, brilliant, I want to come and work on a big brand. So yeah, it's super interesting for me. And I think that the teams that we work with doing this are, you know, we're sort of getting there with this and focused on improving.
Yeah, so I was going to ask a bit more about employee recognition, because you talked a bit about All Stars being a platform for that, but that's relatively new. But, you know, how do you think employee recognition maybe internally supports the employer brand externally? Is there anything, you know, do you think it feeds directly? Is there a connection there, and how does Unilever make that connection?
I think as a comms person, your employees are your biggest advocates. So when something's going wrong, they've got your back. When something's going right, they're your biggest cheerleader. And enabling them to sort of know what's going on, and being open and honest and truthful about the challenges that you're facing, or, you know, where something's gone amazingly well, for me sort of is the sort of crux of employee engagement. And then from that sort of, you know, the employee recognition side of things is, you know, I look at our internal comms, and it is full of stories from people who are doing great stuff in their day-to-day jobs, whether that's, you know, winning new opportunities with different businesses, the products they're developing to sort of, you know, rationalize our SKUs in our sort of customers, you know, businesses, you know, that the stories come from people. And they love that recognition, and teams love that recognition. And whether that's, you know, through our Viva channel, so we're a sort of Viva powerhouse, so to speak, telling our stories through that channel, or whether it's using the town halls that we do, recognizing the great work that people do is obviously gives a huge boost to our colleagues. And then it's lovely seeing them amplify those stories themselves through social. So whether that's reposting, commenting, sharing and liking the sort of, you know, whether that's on LinkedIn or Instagram, you know, I think it's sort of that sort of momentum, that sort of infectious momentum where we're sort of sharing the stories and the recognition that helps us sort of amplify and tell more stories. So yeah, we have the All Stars actually isn't something super new, but we do have sort of annual recognition. I know some functions have recognition for great work. The team I work in this year have done some amazing work around sort of employee recognition to do with finding sort of saving opportunities that we've managed to tell stories about. And a couple of people won some tickets to go and watch Wimbledon, which I was not too jealous of, obviously. So I think, but what was lovely was seeing those stories up afterwards on LinkedIn. So I think it all sort of ties together. for me is the recognition internally goes out externally and then amplifies into the wider ecosystem.
Yeah, you talk a lot about storytelling, and my natural reaction is it feels like that's quite baked into the culture of the organization, and that all employees get fired up when they read other people's stories, and it kind of encourages more stories. Is there any storytelling training internally, or how do you get employees to volunteer that? Is there some kind of, how do you program?
Yeah, so it is, and if my team are watching, and I know Katia is on from my team, if my team are watching, they're probably all sat here laughing, going, "It's one of the hardest parts of our job of finding the stories."
Yeah.
And sometimes we find them by accident when we're in a meeting and we've heard something, we're like, "Oh, I had no idea about that," and we sort of go off and scurry and do it. We do storytelling training, and we have my team have actually created that, and we've done that with quite a few teams now in the operational space to help them understand also how they tell stories to their own teams is really important. The operation side of the business has a lot of change, and part of change is storytelling. So it's sort of like, it's a transferable skill for me. So actually doing storytelling training with our technology leadership team, as I did last year, has enabled them to storytell business change, but also storytell from where they've delivered something brilliant, whether that's the massive cloud migration program that we've done recently, through to sort of some of the technology changes. It can help feed into my team, who are the sort of comm storytellers, to bring it to life in a very different way. So yes, we do have some storytelling training that we've created, and it seems to be working okay, and we'll keep pushing it.
Yeah, I've noticed there's a comment here. So with the stories published on social media like LinkedIn, employees, you attract and retain the right talent. My experience, start from within. Start listening to your stakeholders, start gathering stories, sharing those stories, authentic and human. Yeah, I do honestly, thank you, LinkedIn user. You've come up as LinkedIn user. I'm not sure who it is, but I do think a big part of this is giving employees the confidence and skills to tell stories, and not, whether it's on LinkedIn, on Instagram, at the barbecue, at the dinner table, it's having that innate skill and ability to be able to construct a logical, captivating, not like my daughter who just uses 1,000 words when she could use 50, but just keeping it concise. So it's a great one. Oh, it's Chantal. Thank you for that.
It's interesting. So if I sort of think back through my career a little bit about storytelling, and I think sometimes colleagues are nervous about posting something externally because they're worried they're going to get it wrong, or they're sort of not following the story, or they're not following protocols, and so on and so forth. We do have at Unilever a sort of platform where colleagues can go and find sort of pre-populated stories that they can click through to put up on LinkedIn, which I think helps. And I think what's also very, very lovely is that people do come to me and my team and go, "I want to post something up. How do I do it in the right way?" But I think it is interesting that I do think sometimes colleagues are quite nervous about posting up externally. Now, obviously, we don't want them posting up everything externally. We handle confidential data and so on and so forth. But I think where it's stories about the people and the impact of what we're doing, so some of those stories that I alluded to there, it's like there should be no worries about sharing those stories at all. Yeah. And I think it's about enabling colleagues to tell those stories how they want to in their own way, and we completely support that. I think, as I said, though, that there is obviously things that we wouldn't want colleagues posting up about, like any other business, confidential, financial, so on and so forth. But the human stories, the side of Unilever, absolutely supportive, and I think it's lovely. You know, I do follow quite a lot of my colleagues around the globe, and they do post up what they're doing, and they do absolutely share what they're thinking. And I think that shows who we are again as a business when you're able to sort of read. There's one lady in particular, Tiffany, who works in R&D over in the US. You know, she is such an amazing advocate for you know, the work that she does in the science community to do with like black skin, and I love following her because I learn so much about her and what we're doing as a business. So even though I don't talk to her all the time, I'm learning through LinkedIn what we're up to. So yeah, it's great.
That's weird. That is really interesting. You're learning about what we're doing as a business, but also about the industry through a colleague. That's really cool. So that's, you know, you're educating. It's an education platform internally, but on an external platform, but through the voices of colleagues that you may not have ever met before, perhaps not even spoken to, but
Yeah,
it's great. That is so cool. That is so cool.
yeah.
Marilyn, hello, Marilyn. Thank you for joining us. How do you get over and help others get over the fear that no one cares about your story?
Oh gosh, that's quite sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess I find that really difficult to answer, because I go, even if one person cares about what I've written, that's cool. Like, that's okay. And I think, you know, it's a comms person worst nightmare, right? To spend hours crafting something beautiful and to have like 3 likes. You know, I'm just like, brilliant. Maybe I do need to go and retrain and become something different. But then I sort of I look at it and go, the way we consume stories and content has changed. You know, I've been in comms now for 20 years, and it has changed so much in that time. And I always remember very, very early on in my career, a wonderful boss and a wonderful leader who I'm still very, very good friends with, always said, don't focus on the mass, focus on the people that really matter and that you're sort of trying to influence. That has just resonated with me, I think. You know, it's you know, do you want 100 people to read it and take no notice, or do you want 2 people to read something and take notice?
Yeah.
Like, I would prefer the latter. But that's me.
You know, I think that's a really good point, actually, Marilyn. It's a brilliant point and question that you're asking there, because I think sometimes we get a bit bamboozled with the whole influencer thing, and we feel like we need thousands of impressions and thousands of clicks and 100,000 followers. But actually, Jessica, your point is absolutely spot on. Is it better to get 100 impressions that don't really mean much for that story, or 1 or 2? A great example, actually, that I had just a few weeks ago. My youngest daughter is quite severely dyslexic, and I put a post up about, you know, what dyslexic. We've been on a right journey with her, and but I put a post up, and wow, did it open up a conversation that I never expected. So many amazing people reached out with resources and ideas, and it didn't get that many impressions, but it actually boosted my network with people that are going through a similar thing. So I think it's that. It's less about don't be worried about your popularity, be worried about your purpose. And I think it's better to be purpose driven and focused than broad and popular. Should I say that? Did I?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna give a 30-second story here from a previous job. No names, but they were absolutely obsessed with coverage, headline and coverage. And I sat there one day in a meeting and went, so hang on, and this is no disrespect to the Ham and Highgate News in London, but, you know, do you want to be in the Ham and Highgate News with a readership of, I believe, 600 people? Yeah. Or do you want to be who might pick it up and throw it in the bin or use it for lighting their fires or whatever? Or do you want to be read by 5 people who will go and take your story and do something with it? because you can go and get the headline. I can go and get that headline. Of course I can. But actually, I'd prefer those 5 people to go and do something with my story than that particular newspaper.
Yeah.
No disrespect to them and I get use.
I think it's
told off.
Yeah, we're live, Jessica. I can't cut that one out.
Sorry, it's a great publication.
Yeah. But no, it's such a good point. Yeah, it's difficult to get certain teams share their experience, what Marilyn said. So yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But also, I think when they start to see how others do it and they learn from others and they learn, it's like, oh, okay, I could do that. But that ties a bit into fear of public opinion or the imposter syndrome or being, but generally social is generally a very friendly place. And I think as long as, you're going out there with a topic that that you understand, that you feel passionate about, it's trial and error, and it's worth just having a go. It's better just to try than not to try at all. So
imposter syndrome is an interesting one because I have a director who I work with in the tech team who is the most incredible human being, smart and knows his stuff so much, but he feels like an imposter when he wants to go and talk about his expertise. And I'm like, but no, he has a very, very specific job in the business, has a wonderful team. And he has this sort of imposter syndrome when he sees sort of people talking about, the space that he works in. And I'm like, but what is so unique is you're doing it here. You have a completely different set of opinions to your peers. And actually, that's what the world needs.
Yeah. Spot on. A lot of leaders, actually, it's not the topic of today, but a lot of leaders and executives have exactly the same fear as well as employees. Susan, I saw your comment there as well. Please connect with me. Let's exchange notes. Sorry, I'm going off track here.
Good.
What a great connection. Right. Actually, it does tie a little bit into the next topic I was going to ask you about, measuring impact. So I've got a couple of questions left and then we'll wrap it up. But measuring the impact of employee recognition, measuring the impact of employer brand. What do you measure? Can you measure?
Oh gosh. Okay. We measure a lot at Unilever. So whether that's through our annual employee engagement survey, through to the candidate experiences that people have, through to the work that our reporting team do with things like Brand Watch, Edelman Trust Tracker. I mean, we love a report. We love the insights. We love the intel, and it is a really big part of how we form our thinking and our campaigns and our strategies around what we do. When it comes to employee recognition, I would say that we absolutely look at employee engagement across every single part of the business. And it is so important to us because, an engaged workforce is one that is going to perform and unlock what you need it to do. And obviously part of that is employee recognition. And the work that we do. So the incredible work that the comms colleagues do all over the world link beautifully into that. And it is brilliant to see that Unilever is doing incredibly well on employee engagement. So I'm sort of like, there is clearly a correlation there between, the work that the communications team does and employee engagement, which I think a big part of that is the recognition. The flip side is when it comes to sort of the employee brand and how that's looked at. Again, as I sort of said, we have a lot of metrics and monitoring in terms of sort of what we're looking at and so on and so forth. And I think, whether that's the interactions with our social posts, the number of people applying for jobs, all of that is looked at as you would expect of a company of our size. The employee brand team do a huge amount of work in this space. I'm definitely not the one to sort of be able to sit here and talk in detail about the work that they do looking at it. But, there is a huge amount of metrics and reporting behind our insights. And what I would say is just from the own experience that I've worked with the team on, the stories that I think we've had some of the biggest bumps on this year in terms of content have been the stories of our people. And that for me is wonderful.
I almost wonder, actually, as you were talking, I was thinking there's almost a bit of a cycle going on here, which is employee stories that are shared externally, that are read by your future talent, that are then brought in through the experience and exposed to those stories internally, but it was the external ones that attracted them. And then they then become the storytellers themselves. And so the whole cycle goes, there's a connection, isn't there, between talent retention, attraction, and through it centers around the stories that people have told, both internally and externally. I think there's a sketch coming up there. I'm working that one through in my head.
Yeah, I think you're onto something.
Yeah. Right, my next one, top tip. My last question. If anybody wants to put a question to Jessica, now's the time. But I was going to say, for anybody that was looking for strengthening their employer brand, or their employee advocacy, what would you suggest that they take? Because Unilever is quite advanced and mature in this area. But what would be your recommendations for, how you'd get going on this?
Yeah. So I've given this some thought, because I'm like, okay, whether I've worked in startups or I worked in big companies, and I think that the sort of starting point with anything is going back to a word we talked about a little bit today, is a culture of storytelling. And I think that starts with encouraging colleagues to tell their stories and showing we value storytelling. And the storytelling could be, for example, in a team meeting. It doesn't have to be externally, right? It can be storytelling in a team meeting, an event, or something like that. I think when you start to sort of create a culture of storytelling, you start to unlock things. And I think it is, storytelling workshops, as we've touched on. I think when you can provide people, and my team have a really, really simple template that we created for the team, which is just like prompts as to how to write a story, or how to think about the articulation of a story. Again, it's not sort of rocket science, but I think it really, really helps by having some tools. Absolutely, leaders need to lead by example in this space. Now, my team will probably say I tell the worst stories in the world. I'm cool with that. I can live with that. But I think, I think being open with your own stories as a leader, whether that's something that hasn't gone well, whether that's something that's gone brilliantly, or everything else in between, I think the storytelling you do as a leader encourages other people to do that. I think having a way to tell stories as well. So, for example, we have through our Viva channels, we have sort of various different Viva channels. One in particular that I'm really, really passionate about is our AI space at the moment, given big part of my world I work in. And it is so lovely watching the storytelling from my colleagues all over the globe coming through on this one channel that people are fascinated and curious about. So they're telling stories about what they're working on. They're telling stories about what they're reading externally. And I love that we're using a sort of, corporate channel to start telling stories about a space for our business that isn't new. AI is not new to Unilever. We've had it for many, many years. But it's brilliant that we've got these conversations going. So absolutely, having ways to tell stories, whether that's Viva or internal blogs or whatever, brilliant. And I think celebrating the stories, so like I've said, our all-stars at Unilever, absolutely celebrate those stories. And I think through all of that, coming back to the storytelling by, platforms encouraging being vulnerable and open as a leader to your own stories, I think that creates more connection as teams, creates more connections into the organizations and to each other. Magic.
Yeah, I think that's great. And actually, I hadn't thought about that, the vehicles for actually getting employees to tell their stories. So yeah, Viva channels, getting them to maybe record videos, giving them the content creation skills to be able to convey
Yeah.
those stories is quite
Yeah.
interesting as well. So
And don't
that was,
underestimate team meetings for storytelling. You know,
okay.
do not underestimate your team meetings for storytelling. You know,
Mhm.
there it doesn't have to just be about, you know, what's going on with X, Y, and Z. You know, there are opportunities to share in team meetings about, you know, the things you have worked on or what you've learned.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, someone's actually put here, LinkedIn user, always start with inspiring about the value and what's in it for them, for the employees, that is.
Yeah.
Why tell stories and why do that? Just very quickly, I know we're up on time, but I was going to say some of the potential challenges that somebody might face or pitfalls that they should be aware of before they get going. Have you got any to share?
Oh gosh, yes. She says where to start.
Yes.
Like like with any anything, you will find people. So say for example, if you're going to use a platform like Viva or something like that, you know, people are going to post stuff up that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And you know, or it might be a little bit close for comfort or so on and so forth. And I think just I think that comes around, you know, some of it comes around like, you know, policies and so on and so forth. And sometimes, you know, we do have people post stuff up online that really shouldn't be up online. It happens from time to time. I think it's how you handle that as a comms person who is part of a business is really, really important, because what you don't want to do is discourage somebody from posting again and so on and so forth. So I think inevitably sometimes things go wrong. It's how you handle them, like anything. And do that. And I think, you know, people do, you know, I think people are hesitant. It comes back to that sort of, you know, imposter syndrome. What really, I think it's like with everything, it's a bit of a learning process. It's a little bit trial and error. You're not going to get it right. We don't get things right all the time. My goodness, we don't get things right all the time. But I think as long as you can learn and pick yourselves up and recalibrate, then it's good. And I think the other thing for me that I think is an issue that I think all communications people faces, enthusiasm fades as well. So you can sort of start a program off and everybody's like super enthusiastic about it and wanting to do it. And then if people are not sort of seeing the interaction and so on and so forth, you know, enthusiasm fades. So it's like, you know, think about your content and think about how to sort of keep reinvigorating what you're doing. Because gosh, if I read the same news story every single day, my enthusiasm for the news would wane. So yeah, think about your content. Things will go wrong, and just keep, I guess, just keep love storytelling ultimately as well. I think that for me is just something that's so important with this sort of topic, for talent and finding talent, attracting talent, retaining talent. Is storytelling is a big part of that, and you just have to keep the magic alive in that regard, and just keep focusing on the outcomes of that.
This has been wonderful, Jessica. Thank you so much. I mean, I've taken so many notes here. I've got a few things that bubble up for me. You know, your employees, they'll have your back when things are not going so well, but when they are going well, they'll be your biggest cheerleaders. You know, bringing them with you is huge. Storytelling as part of the culture will play. I'm going to try and sketch that out, but there is something definitely there. And then also storytelling workshops, leaders leading by example. And that last bit there, actually, I think it's a really good point and a good advice for people is things will always go wrong, but it's how you handle it that matters. And I've seen cases where, you know, employees have got themselves into some hot water, you know, not intentionally.
No.
Most employees don't do it on purpose. It's an accident.
Not at all.
You know, and if you sort of hammer down straight away, you shouldn't have done that, you know, you've just lost someone, and it's how you handle it. So that, I think that is superb advice. So brilliant. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all those insights and the whole way things are done at Unilever. And if your team is saying you're not a good storyteller, I don't agree, because actually you told some brilliant stories.
I'll get some feedback after this, I'm sure. So it's all good.
But yeah, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for everyone who joined us live with the comments and being part of this. And anybody who wants to watch this will be on our podcast fairly soon too. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you for joining us. And thanks everyone here. All right.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. See you in 2 weeks.